Okay, hey, this is Dr. Shaan from Vitality Chiropractic. Welcome back to our interview series where I'm going to be talking with other healthcare professionals about their stories, how they get started, and of course, the people that they help. Today's guest is a special guest, hence the odd timing. I know usually we do these around the afternoon, but of course, we're a bit earlier in the morning today because our guest is coming from America. He's actually based in Arkansas. So Dr. Grant Dennis is an upper cervical chiropractor based in Little Rock. He has a focus on helping the sickest people in his community utilizing upper cervical chiropractic care, and he's the owner of the Specific Center in Little Rock. Dr. Grant and I see very similar patients, and he's also an experienced public speaker, including recently offering free extra online training for chiropractors during the COVID-19 in conjunction with Sherman College. Hey Grant, how's it going?
Doing fantastic. I appreciate you having me on. First of all, I think this could be the first time in the history of Zoom Facebook Lives that an Arkansan and someone in Singapore are able to, in real time, correspond and provide value to our viewers. And so, first off, I appreciate you having me on, and look forward to the dialogue.
Thank you for coming in, because I know it can't be too easy for you. You're still in practice, and as you know, for the people watching, there's around a 13-hour difference between us, so it's not always easiest to try and arrange both parts. But thank you for being here.
Yeah, absolutely. I was glad we were able to get this, finally get on the same page. It was funny. Just for those of you watching now, we tried to coordinate this a couple of days before, and we forgot that we're on different times. So it's actually Wednesday where you are, and it's Tuesday where I am. And so, it was interesting. I'm glad we were able to put this together.
Yeah, absolutely. So for those people who have never been to a chiropractor before, how would you describe chiropractic to them?
Yeah, I think one of the biggest things that's super important to understand for someone who's never had an exposure to chiropractic or doesn't know what chiropractic is, really the difference between, chiropractic essentially is founded off 4 key principles. So if you're watching this for the first time and you're just being introduced to chiropractic for the first time, there's really 4 essential principles or virtues that we choose to view the world and our philosophy through. And the first is that we understand and assume and appreciate that the body's a self-healing organism. When you get a cut, it heals. That's premise number 1. And then premise number 2 is that healing is it's facilitated by the communication that occurs between the brain and body via the nerve system. So that's the second premise that we more or less philosophically agree on in chiropractic. The third is, as chiropractors, what we do is we locate where those interferences occur in that healing mechanism or in that nerve system, brain to body communication mechanism. We locate where those interferences are. For me and Dr. Shaan, I think for us, it's essentially the upper cervical spine is the number 1 place that we look for interference in our particular analysis and way of looking at things. And fourth is when we locate those interferences, we apply a specific chiropractic adjustment, which removes that nerve system interference, irritation, which we as chiropractors collectively call a vertebral subluxation. When we can detect when that's present in the nerve system and then via an adjustment remove it, we inherently allow the body to heal itself from the inside out. And so really those 4 premises are what chiropractic is founded on. And so if you're someone out there who thinks and assumes that the body is a self-healing organism, and I think most people would agree with us on that the body is a self-healing organism, then from there you have to deductively assume that inherently my body's designed to heal. And so chiropractic is essentially founded on finding where those interferences or any of those obstructions to the healing mechanism that are occurring. And when we remove those, we see amazing things with our patients. And people always like to call them miracles, but I just think that they're not miracles if you expect them to happen. And in our offices, we expect good outcomes. We expect good things in people we find that are good candidates. But chiropractic really is based on those 4 things.
Yeah, I completely agree. It's again about the person themselves being the healer in many senses, not us being these magical people that have wizardry powers or anything like that. It's just letting them do what they're always able to do.
Absolutely. Yeah. And it's not because we're deficient in any one medication or deficient in any one, outside in approach. It's that, the inside out model that we choose to look through is what sets chiropractic apart from other healthcare fields.
Absolutely. So, say for yourself, let's start in the beginning. Why did you decide to get into chiropractic? What drew you to chiropractic?
Yeah, this is an interesting story. I actually was one who didn't really grow up in a chiropractic setting growing up. I was raised in a family that was very medically minded. And what drew me to chiropractic originally was I always knew that I wanted to help people. I always knew that I wanted to help the sickest of the sick and those who are suffering get well. I always knew that. And what's interesting is I was a uh, I was a collegiate athlete, and I played baseball in college on a scholarship, and I was an infielder, and so I was particularly good with my hands. I was also offered multiple scholarships as a receiver in high school to go play college football. Unfortunately, I was height challenged, and football just wasn't going to work out. So I chose baseball instead, and I was always really really crafty with my hands. Being an infielder, I was always told I had really good hands, and so when I graduated undergrad and I knew that I wanted to go and help people, the other connection I made was I knew I wanted to help people with my hands. And so I always thought, okay, I'll be a surgeon or I'll be some sort of, OBGYN, or I'll do something where I get to deliver life with my hands. I get to save people through surgery with my hands. And, lo and behold, what happened was a couple weeks out of actually going to medical school, I discovered chiropractic. And I always say I didn't choose chiropractic; chiropractic chose me. And on a whim, just kind of going with my conscience, I decided to go to chiropractic school instead of medical school. And about my fourth quarter there, I realized what my true calling was when I discovered Upper Cervical at the Art of the Specific training program as a student, which is the very same training program that I go back and teach at with students and docs now. And so to see it all come full circle, it's been really cool. But really and truly, most people always say that they chose their profession, but I truly believe that chiropractic chose me. And I was just glad I went with my conscience and was drawn in by it. And I get to live my life dream every single day with helping the sickest of the sick get well with a specific scientific adjustment when necessary to facilitate healing. And from there, the rest is kind of history.
Okay. So you mentioned a bit about upper cervical there. Of course, again, some people may not know too much about upper cervical. Why would you choose upper cervical over full body or full spine chiropractic?
Yeah, so for some time, we've known, as and when I say we, I just mean us as healthcare providers and practitioners, the importance of the upper cervical spine. I don't think anybody would argue with you that if you were going to go and try to end somebody's life force, and in fact, in martial arts, you're taught that if you're going to end somebody, it's done via the guillotine, near naked choke, right to the upper cervical spine. And so what we do know is that area of the body in particular is very, very important for life function. And so I decided to go into upper cervical specific work just because of the more and more I dove into the neurology and I dove into the research and I dove into the philosophy of chiropractic and how this whole thing, how we can objectively measure improvement in patients, how we can really assess who are good candidates and who aren't for our particular type of care. I think it's a big misunderstanding that one of the biggest things that I think is misunderstood in chiropractic is that it's for anybody with a spine. And that can be true in some cases, but really it's not in most. Is that there's especially in the world of upper cervical, we have an analysis, we have a lot of science, we have a lot of objectivity that's at our disposal. That if you are a very analytical, attention to detail, precise, specific type of mind, upper cervical really sort of draws you to that, because we look at millimeters, not centimeters and inches. We look at 0.03 degrees Celsius versus 10 degrees Fahrenheit. We look at things through a very specific scientific lens, which fortunately for patients who are super sick works out and lends very well, because by the time they usually make it to us, it's because they've been looked at through a macro model. In other words, a very systematized way of looking at things. And so when we look at things very specifically in the upper neck and only exclusively taking care of the upper two bones in the neck and nothing else, that's really what kind of delineates an upper cervical doc from a full spine doc. Is the only thing we're looking at is the upper two bones in the neck. And by process of elimination, patients usually find their way into our offices because everyone's looked everywhere else but there. And so if you're someone out there who's sick and suffering and tried everything and feel like nothing's worked, then you usually will make your way into Dr. Rye's office, and he's going to be able to help you more than likely.
And why did you particularly choose knee chest? Because I know we do the same kind of technique. What drew you to this rather than maybe Blair or orthogonal or even toggle as well? I'm sure toggle would have been taught extensively at school.
Yeah, so you mean the actual application of the adjustment? What drew me to the knee chest adjustment versus the side posture toggle? Yeah, that's actually a question I get quite a bit when I talk to other practitioners in chiropractic. What made you choose knee chest versus side posture? And I think it really just comes down to the particular. I always liken it, and I'm an analogy guy, and so I always look at it this way. There's lots of different golfers. Some use Titleist, some use Nike, some use Easton, so TaylorMade. There's a lot of different types of clubs, but at the end of the day, when the club hits the ball, it all should look the same. And so, whenever we're applying a specific chiropractic adjustment to the upper neck, whether it be side posture toggle, knee chest, all of that really at its purest form, when the delivery of the adjustment occurs, it really all looks kind of the same. And so I think it really just is your feel, your preference, your body type, the particular way you like to, do you like to feel a bone move? Do you not like to feel a bone move? I think a lot of it has to do with your particular height. I think knee chest lends itself actually, and ironically, a little bit to more of a tall and slender build. I just think I'm kind of a unique outlier in that you can adapt the table a little bit nowadays to a shorter person. But I just always knew that I wanted to use a solid headpiece technique because it lends itself to be a little bit more gentler. It lends itself to be a little safer as far as a patient outcome perspective. It doesn't allow for any quick rotary motion of the neck. It doesn't allow for any quick stretch of vessels. Just the more and more I looked at what it is that we're exactly trying to achieve in removing nerve pressure, the knee chest actual adjustment was what lended itself to me and my body type, my particular art of chiropractic. We can all paint a picture of a mountain range, and our application of that art might look a little different. We might be able to tell it's a mountain range, but your mountain range is going to look a little bit different than mine, but essentially we're still getting to the same outcome. And so the actual application of the adjustment is truly your art form. And so my particular art form that I'm most comfortable with and really allowing patients to unlock their healing mechanism has always been the knee chest posture. That doesn't mean that anyone using a side posture toggle or anybody using an instrument assisted adjustment is any less effective any more than someone using a Titleist versus a TaylorMade versus a Nike club. Essentially, we're achieving the same thing. I would just like to think that truly the work you put in up to the swing to hit the actual ball and it go where it is actually where the expertise and the difficulty lies. And so what particular art form you choose to use really is kind of negligible. It's just for me in the knee chest posture, I just find that my patient outcomes and results lend themselves at a greater, higher probability with that particular type of adjustment.
I think one of the things, at least for me as well, with knee chest, as well as I agree with you, it comes a lot down to the feel. I think it's quite visceral, but it's also for charity because it's very difficult. I know people who do orthogonal and it's great work. They have great results. It's very difficult to bring that kind of equipment into a charity situation and to an outreach situation. Tell me more about your outreach events you had in the past.
Sorry, you kind of broke up on me there. Would you repeat that one more time?
I was going to say, tell me more about some of the outreach and charity events you've been doing in the past. I know you're quite active as well.
Yeah. So one of the things that's super important to me with, and more importantly, the organization and the training program that I teach and I'm a co-instructor with, which I know you currently train with also, which is the Art of the Specific. One of the things that's super important to us and really our big mission and our vision behind not only the Art of the Specific, but the Specific Chiropractic Centers globally is really making this work, this upper cervical knee chest work, which less than 3% of chiropractors globally actually practice with. Which means if there's that few of people actually practicing this, that means that the access for people to this type of care is very limited. And so one of the things that's really big for us in our mission is creating more access to this type of care for people around the world. And so we go to countries like El Salvador, and I know you've been on the trip to the Philippines, and we've taken trips to the Dominican Republic and Haiti and some different places, and we're always looking for different places that we can create access to for people to have access to upper cervical specific care. And so what we do is we pick out 1 or 2 or 3 trips a year where, we take a good group of docs who devote their time and their resources, and they go out and we give charitable care to people in underserved countries and try to create access for these people. And really our true mission behind that is not to just go and provide care, but really our true mission behind that is to provide care, but also to work with local legislators to bring about law, which makes chiropractic a legal entity in their particular region. So for example, in the country of El Salvador, chiropractic isn't actually a recognized legal entity. There is no chiropractic board. There is no board of examiners. So yes, there may be some chiropractors, but they're sort of like the barber who doesn't have a board. So they're not a recognized, it's a very much sought after thing by the people, but they can't actually seek this legally without a regulatory board. And so there's really 2 big, missions that we try to seek in these charitable, and we call them outreach events and organizational outreach. And there's really twofold. Is number 1, to provide quality care and to see the sickest of the sick in El Salvador who truly need their nervous systems to perform so they can optimally heal and function at a higher level. But also secondly, so that they can experience this care after we leave, so that there can be doctors after us come in, practice under a regulatory board, be a licensed entity, and they can continue this care on past us, and therefore leaving a legacy that's much bigger than us. And so really it's a life-changing trip for our docs. It's a life-changing trip for our students to go. And it's more importantly, a life-changing trip for the people that we actually get to serve in the countries of El Salvador and the Philippines. And so to say that it would be a life-changing and a world-giving event, and especially in times that we're in now, with the COVID situation, one of the things that is really interesting is looking at those who are truly serving from a place of abundance and benevolence versus those who are looking to gain from.
Seem to have lost Dr. Grant here a little bit. Give it a second.
I lost you.
Yes, I was just messaging you, say exactly the same. Yeah. So you were saying about, you still talking about the trips?
Yeah, where did you lose me?
Probably about the last maybe 10 to 15 seconds. So you're saying about leaving a legacy, and of course, that's why we're going out to see these people and give them an opportunity to get access to care.
Yeah. I think the biggest thing is just making sure that after we leave, these people still have the opportunity to experience the same type of care with a doc who they can feel confident that they're getting quality care from even after we leave.
And I agree. It's one of the reasons I wanted to come on these trips compared to some others. It's not a slight to some others, but there sometimes can be this feel of going and doing something once a year and thinking that that's going to make the biggest difference possible, which is a little bit ego-driven sometimes, unfortunately, rather than actually wanting to go out and do something bigger and better. You mentioned about some of the chronic conditions that you wanted to see. Of course, seeing the sickest of the sick. Tell me about some of the cases that you see on a regular basis.
Yeah, this is something I could go, on and on. I mean, I've seen some pretty amazing things, and I think it's what's interesting about practicing upper cervical is if you walked up onto a mountaintop and found a cave that contained plants that once you consumed killed cancer cells at 100% success rate, and you didn't go and tell people about this, you would make the argument that's unethical of you to not provide this to the world, correct? And so I sort of feel the same way with upper cervical. Obviously what we do doesn't cure cancer to 100%, but what we do and what I do see in my office, and I'm sure what you see in your office every day is what a lot of people would consider miracles, but it's things we expect. I mean, I've seen a 55-year-old woman who's been wheelchair bound for 5 years get out of a wheelchair and walk after about 10 visits of care. I've seen a man in a wheelchair start to kick his feet again and regain motor movement in his feet. I've seen, a 65-year-old male with, complex regional pain syndrome or reflex sympathetic dystrophy, completely come off all medication dependency, completely come off chronic pain meds. And I think that truly, if someone who's out there watching this, who is a good upper cervical patient, it's truly anybody who's been everywhere, tried everything, and feels like the traditional medical route just hasn't gotten them to a place of satisfactory healing. And, I don't think there's anybody out there walking, the earth who enjoys taking medication. I think that they take medication because it allows them to live a life that they want to live. And so if you were to give them the option to live that very same life without medication dependency, I don't think there's anybody out there that wouldn't take that. And so, truly in my office, and I know in yours too, I truly market and I truly look for an ideal client, an ideal patient that believes all those four things that I talked about in the beginning, that their body is designed to heal, and they're
A little bit of break here. Just give it a second while everything should catch up. Hey, hey, welcome back.
the Russians are hacking us.
I guess
Anyway,
you tried to have a Skype call 13 hours apart.
Yeah, I think you may have lost me when I was talking about, seeing the sickest of the sick.
Yeah, and you were saying about picking an ideal client and the right kind of person for your practice.
Yeah, I think an ideal client for me is anyone who in particular, that my ideal demographic is a male or female between the age of 50 and 75 who's lost control of their health, is chronic pain, whatever the case may be, and does not want to be on medication dependency, wants to thrive instead of just survive the day-to-day in their life, and truly feels like that they've been a lost cause in the traditional medical route and is looking for answers, and truly is at a point where they're at the last stop shop. Your doctor, they're the last doc I'm going to see before I throw the towel in. And that's usually where we want you to be when you walk into our office, but that's usually kind of who I look to target.
So for a lot of chiropractors, of course, they see asymptomatic cases, and especially now with COVID going on, this is something the public is starting to understand a lot more, that you can have a problem without feeling the problem, since it's such a small part of the nervous system. Is that something you see a lot in practice as well?
Yeah, I do. And sometimes I have people that I tell, just because you're asymptomatic oftentimes can indicate that there's an even bigger problem. For example, I manage currently a 16-year-old boy who doesn't feel pain. And so his actual goal of care is to experience a pain stimulus. And so because he can't take a shower, he can't chew his food, he can't do things with his hands because he cuts his hands and he burns himself. And it's truly something sometimes I have to relay to patients, that truly the symptom of pain can be a blessing for you sometimes. And it's something you take for granted. It indicates that your body's aware of sensing its environment and sensing harm versus good. And it's not until you manage somebody who truly wants to feel pain that you truly appreciate pain as a blessing. And so, oftentimes, sometimes the presence or absence of a symptom isn't the true indicator of health. And if you look at Webster's dictionary, the definition of health, that literally is a functional, how well do I function, not merely the absence of symptoms or the presence of symptoms. And so, yes, I do see asymptomatic patients. I see wellness patients, but I think it's because they see the value in a high functioning nervous system, whether they want to be an elite athlete, whether they just want to function optimally. I do think in today's times, especially, the medical model is really saying what we've known all along, which is you can have an issue developing in your body and not have symptoms occurring.
I mean, that's one of the things we're really seeing, especially right now here in Singapore. We're having these big leaps in numbers, but I talked to a number of nurses and doctors who are working in these areas, all the dormitories, and most of the people they're testing, they had 1,000 cases yesterday, a lot of them are either very mild or no symptoms, because again, you don't have to have a problem to necessarily feel that you have a problem. Kind of going back a bit, you mentioned before about you were looking into, or you at med school. Is there a particular specialty that you were looking at the time, or is it just that you were just kind of waiting for?
Yeah, I just knew I wanted to help people with my hands, and so that I was actually looking into orthopedic surgery. I was looking into cardiovascular surgery. I was looking into some sort of specialty that would allow me to look somebody in the face and say, "I think we've saved your life." Or I think we've given you a higher quality of life. And so to be able to see that transpire in my office every single day without having to cut, without having to inject, or without having to medicate, truly still fulfills the purpose. And in fact, it's even more sweeter because it's truly, we're not adding or taking anything away. We're just working with the life force that occurs in the body. And so, what's cool is, I also don't ever have to walk into that room and tell a family member, I lost your family member. And so, and just looking at it in hindsight, it was such a blessing to be able to find a path and hit that path, not quite knowing where exactly I was headed with it. So if you're somebody out there who's watching, doesn't quite know where you are in your career or your career choice, or even who you choose as a provider, truly favorable outcomes always favor the decisive. And so sometimes just making a decision, being decisive and moving forward with that, not really actually knowing what's going to come of it, is sometimes when the greatest things happen in your life.
Okay. And one thing you mentioned before about is, of course, having an ideal client, and this and other things will help to have a busy practice. What do you think are some of the most important factors for your own success?
Yeah, I think in any business endeavor, not just in chiropractic or in any office setting or anytime you're embarking on, truly anything, you want to make sure that you have solid systems in place. I think that building infrastructure and putting systems in place that allow you to grow, but also, and more importantly, putting systems in place that allow you to make sure that the client and the doctor match. The worst thing, and I know there's a lot of people who are watching this can probably, relate to this. There's nothing worse than going to a doctor and really feeling like this isn't a good fit. Or this isn't a good connection, or are you sure you can help me, or am I sure you're the right person for me? And so, I think one of the biggest success factors for a lot of docs and patients, also is really finding a doc who has solid systems, solid procedures, solid analyzation techniques, that really has a lot of experience with seeing cases similar to yours. I think but systems most definitely, I think, has been able to contribute a lot to my success early on, especially my first year of practice. I had a great first year of practice, and I'm currently in the 5th year. My first year was just totally knocked out of the park, but it was because I was trained up in solid systems. I had good coaches. I have a great coach in Dr. Shaan, who's coached me since the day I opened. I think surrounding yourself with good people who have your best interest at heart, who have a solid system, and truly that you can plug and play, and a system that's proven effective. I think that's truly, two of the big important things that contribute to a lot of success early on.
Yeah, I find that's something I see a lot with other chiropractors, where they kind of almost become a little bit averse to a system, saying that, it's almost too straight line every time. But I mean, if I went to a dentist and they go, okay, I've never tried it, but I'm going to try and take your tooth out a different way today, I'd be a little bit concerned.
you would, yes. And you also would be very concerned if you walked in there and there was no one right way to do anything, sort of.
Absolutely,
Hey,
yeah.
I think usually I have you fill out the paperwork first, but today I'm just going to drill the tooth and have you fill out the paperwork later. Like if there's no systematized way of processing people or taking care of people, and it's the same for each person, that lends issues. So I think that's kind of what you were getting at.
Yeah. I mean, it doesn't matter, to be honest, even outside of healthcare, even if whether you're with a dentist, whether you're with a mechanic, whether you're with a psychologist, whether you're dealing with emotional issues, all of them have to have some level of system. Otherwise, you're going down the wrong road. It's always going to be a problem.
Yeah, I think there was actually a State Farm commercial not too long ago where the guy's in the bed about to have surgery and the doctor walks in and he goes, "Hey, I just got off a 3-week leave." And he's like, "You a little nervous?" He was like, "Yeah, I think I am." He's like, "Yeah, me too." He's like, "We'll figure it out." And so Yeah, I think a lot of times you can really tell competence of a doc early on by their systems and processes. The fact that they're using scripts on you and you don't know it. I think that's what leads to fluidity, comfort, that they're definitely in the right place, that they're definitely going to achieve the outcome with somebody that they know is going to help to hold their hand along the way, every step of the way.
It's interesting actually you mentioned about that State Farm advert, and that's one thing again that I really love about Upper Cervical is that there is a big tendency towards drills. How important would you say adjusting drills are?
Yeah, I think it's paramount. I think it's one of the things actually, if you were to look at upper cervical docs versus a full spine doc, I think, especially a hands-on upper cervical doc who does some sort of knee chest posture like we do, um, we drill our art and we drill our craft. I'm just going to use an analogy again, kind of going back to the same golfer. Those golfers that are professional golfers don't just walk up to the ball for the first time and hit it 300 yards down the center of the fairway. It just doesn't work out that way. You put in hours and hours and hours and hours and hours of repetition. And so does upper cervical docs. We put in hours and hours and hours of repetition and drilling to allow our bodies to achieve a muscle memory. And that's really why you drill is, one of my mentors always told me, and one of my coaches used to always say that, preparation lends to opportunity. And if you're nervous when the opportunity arrives, it's because you haven't put in the preparation required to remove nervousness. And so when I approach a patient, I'm never nervous because I've put in the work ahead of time and I know I'm adjusting the patient in the right place at the right time. And I've put in enough work drilling that my muscle memory should take over. And really that allows me to listen for the patient to relax. It allows me to deliver an adjustment without getting in my own head. And, by the time that golfer gets to the ball to hit it, or by the time we get to a patient to adjust them, there's really no thinking that occurs anymore. The work and the preparation has been put in up to that point. And so I truly think that's what sets apart great practitioners from mediocre practitioners, and master practitioners from mediocre is the master, practitioners have put in the work and they've prepared that when the opportunity meets that for that time for someone to receive a life-changing adjustment, it wasn't by chance. It's always by a lot of hard work, and it's quite frankly by a lot of conspiracy by the universe for those two events to connect also. And so that's one of my favorite things about practice is watching the universe conspire for a miracle to occur for that patient on that day in that moment. And so, but yes, I think that the drills are paramount. I think it's truly what sets apart a master doc from a mediocre doc.
Absolutely, absolutely. You mentioned before about, of course, putting in a lot of extra hours and extra work. What are some of the other biggest challenges you've had in practice?
Yeah, I think early on in practice, I think a lot of docs do something similar, which is they try to be all things to all people. Um, I think one of the things that happens is you come right out of practice and you just want to help so many people. And sometimes that excitement to want to help a lot of people also lends you to not be as strong on your systems and let some people slip through the cracks of your practice that should have probably never been in your practice to begin with. Not because they're not good people, not because they're not sick, but because the timing just wasn't right and their worldview and your worldview didn't match at the time. And so what I mean by that is, as an upper cervical doc, I'll just use an example. If someone were to come into me with a acute hot lower back that happened over the weekend, I was bending over in the yard and I heard a pop in my low back and now my low back hurts. I'm an upper cervical doc. I specialize in the upper neck. So if your goal for that day is to be out of pain today, I'm probably not your best fit. Now, early on in practice, instead of making the appropriate referral for that person to where they need to be, I would try to, in my negligence as a young doc, bring that patient in when they are not actually a good fit that day, probably. And so that doesn't mean that a month down the road, when they're out of that acute chronic pain, or that acute pain, that they can't come back and be a great fit. But sometimes our job as doctors essentially is to play quarterback for people and get them into the right places and get them into into other practitioners' ideal clients' hands, right? And so I network a lot with physical therapists. I network a lot with massage therapists. I network a lot with medical doctors, acupuncturists, because I also know what are ideal clients for them. And patients don't know when they call us who are good fits for them. They just see chiropractic, I have pain, I need to go to you. And what they don't realize is sometimes that this may not be the best place for you in this exact moment. I need to send you somewhere else for the time being. And then I'm probably going to bring you back to figure out what's the underlying problem that's caused this to begin with. And so I think early on in practice, that's something a lot of docs struggle with is when to make an appropriate referral, when to give appropriate referral, when to receive an appropriate referral, how to properly examine patients. I think that's why it's why it's called practice. Is it's something that comes with practice. Is the more patients you encounter and the more patients you take care of, the more and more you become familiar with who's ideal for me. It's more or less the more at bats I get before I realize what's a good pitch I'm looking for. And, I think that's one thing that a lot of docs early on struggle with. I think a lot of young docs too, especially for me early on, was just the running of a business. There's this thing called cash flow that is very essential to businesses, which a lot of businesses right now are realizing amongst the COVID, pandemic is cash flow isn't exactly king right now. If there's not a whole lot coming in and there's a lot going out, this lends problems. And so, my first year or two, just navigating that, having the coaches in place to help me navigate through that. I could have never done it on my own. But those are just some of the things, namely, I think also just one that comes to mind is learning how to properly manage patients through care, and learning when I'm over adjusting and learning when I'm under adjusting. That's another one that I think is, for those of you watching who aren't real familiar with upper cervical, one of the things that really sets us apart is we don't adjust our patients on every visit. We run scanning techniques to know when to adjust our patients, and more importantly, when it's not safe to adjust our patients. And so you may be somebody sitting there thinking, well, I've always heard that chiropractic was not safe, or that there was, something adverse could happen to me. And the true answer to that is there could be if you were not analyzed correctly by someone who knows how to adjust you correctly, and more importantly, when to adjust you and when not to adjust you, because there is safe times and there's unsafe times. And so truly what sets us apart as upper cervical docs is knowing when, where, and more importantly, when not to adjust somebody is really what I think is a tough thing to early on in practice sort of learn to manage. But once you learn to manage, I think that's something that patients appreciate. The level of results and the level of care they receive is because that we're looking at things that in that sort of way.
I mean, I completely agree. One of the statistics I love is that it's 1 in 5 million is a chance of anything going wrong with chiropractic. And if you look at the research, it's not even based on chiropractors, it's based on physical therapists, or I think one chiropractor who, again, did not do a proper analysis, doing these bad manipulations. Then digressing from that, you're more likely to die. I think it's 1 in 50,000 from ibuprofen. Or if a liver, I know from a colleague of mine here, he works in liver research, and he said the chance of death by biopsy is 1 in 500. Which is
yeah.
It's not even a treatment, it's just getting tested.
Well, and the other thing that, when we're specifically talking about stroke that isn't often mentioned is the five leading risk factors for stroke are heart disease, high blood pressure medications, diabetes, and obesity. Well, when we speak of those 5 things, we know those are direct risk factors. Notice none of those were chiropractic. And so there's a lot of people who have stroke but have heart disease or have high blood pressure. And so truly the reason that event happened had nothing to do with a chiropractic event. We could make the argument it was going to happen anyway, regardless of a chiropractic event happening, because you had those 5 risk factors. So, and the list goes on. Now, there's a lot of things that are associated. There's a big difference between a risk factor, which is those 5, and there's a big difference between associations, things that are associated with a stroke event. Well, chiropractic has been associated. Well, that, when you associate something, that literally is anything that happened to that person with the 6 months leading up to them having a stroke. So the other things that are associated are sneezing, sexual activity, painting with your neck, like painting with your head up, sleeping on your stomach. I mean, there's a whole lot of other things that are associated. And so to not go and seek out chiropractic because you're under this false pretense that you could have a stroke truly is, I think you have a much better chance of a deer walking in and having dinner with you tonight than you do of a stroke event after a chiropractor, if properly examined and if properly assessed in an examination setting.
Oh yeah, I think percentage-wise, you're just as likely to get it from a GP. And again, it's nothing against the GP; they didn't cause it. It's just like you said, it may just be unfortunately that time where it's going to happen for that person.
Absolutely.
So for yourself, what are some goals you have for your own practice and maybe some bigger goals you have for the profession?
Yeah, I think I'll probably just go off one of each. I think, just for me personally, one of my big goals is, I serve as the vice president of the International Federation of Chiropractors and Organizations, which is an organization that's dedicated to protecting the chiropractor's right to locate and analyze and adjust vertebral subluxation, which I touched on a little bit earlier in the video. It's truly what sets chiropractors apart from a physical therapist, from a massage therapist, from an acupuncturist, from an osteopathic provider. A lot of people, truly, and if you're someone watching this saying like, well, what is the difference between a chiropractor and a physical therapist? A physical therapist takes care of your musculoskeletal system, and a chiropractor takes care of your nerve system. And so, truly for me personally, my big passion and my big why is taking initiative politically to guard our ability to do that, to make sure that nobody, can write a law that says we can no longer do that, or that somebody comes in and says us and physical therapists are the same thing. We don't unstick stuck joints. We don't just move bones and assume healing occurs. That's what osteopractors do, or physical therapists perform manipulations or mobilizations. They're just trying to increase range of motions. And I'm not here to say that that's a negative thing. In fact, I would say that that's probably a good thing for the body. But what we also know is a good thing for the body is measuring nerve system function and ensuring that proper brain to body communication is occurring. And so that's what we as chiropractors do. And so, me personally, that's my big goal. If you were to say a personal life goal is to dedicate my life's work to never seeing that taken from us. I think for me clinically, one of my big goals is to, honestly just see as many people as I possibly can and check as many people as I possibly can until I no longer have the ability to check people for a nervous system disruption. So I plan on practicing till I'm 95 or until my hands no longer work. I plan on, training docs and practicing myself. And I can't ever see a day where I'm not practicing and taking care of people. And so, that's truly, I think, for me, my two biggest passions currently with where my practice is and where my personal life is and professional life. I think those are the two driving forces for me. And then thirdly, really is kind of what I touched on earlier, is creating access to as many people worldwide as I possibly can to this thing that is upper cervical chiropractic.
Okay. And in an ideal world, what are some changes that you'd love to see either in the States or in other parts of the world in healthcare systems as well?
So the question was, what changes would I like to see?
Yeah.
I think one of the changes I would like to see more than anything is I wish that people understood the detriment that not having a functioning and healthy nervous system, because you have a vertebral subluxation present in your upper neck. In other words, you have a bone in your upper neck that's misaligned, that is literally choking off your body's ability to heal. I wish that people understood how detrimental that is as much as they understood how detrimental COVID-19 is. We're in a time now where people are very, very scared of an invisible enemy. And I don't think that they truly understand. And what I hope to see in my life's work is that they truly understand that there's another invisible enemy currently in our society that's plaguing our healthcare system. And it's called a vertebral subluxation in the upper neck that is inhibiting your body's ability to function, heal, and your optimal expression of life, that you also don't know is an invisible enemy that occurs in your life. And so, my big, the thing that I wish would change is I wish that we, and we're doing our part, people like you and I, but I wish that there was more of an awareness brought to that invisible enemy. And what I would love to see change in our society is that people understand just how big that invisible enemy is to the health and human expression of life. And that's truly the change that I think, and that I hope, and that I think will be seen. And it certainly will not be because of a lack of effort on my part.
And you mentioned, of course, about COVID. It's something that we can't really avoid. But on, I guess, more of a positive note, what are some tips or some advice you would give for people who are currently maybe working from home or not able to get out as much and maybe their lives are a bit disrupted? What would you suggest that they should be doing at the moment?
Yeah, I think there's a couple different things. I think the first thing is turn the TV off. I think the biggest thing is we're surrounded by negativity, and negativity breeds stress, and stress breeds physiologically in our bodies a suppressed amount of immunity and healing. And so I think the first thing is just get around more positivity and get away from negativity, and understand that there is hundreds of thousands of people that have recovered from COVID, and there's relatively very few who have died in relation to who have recovered. So it speaks to what we've been saying, and that we know the body heals itself. And that's why so many people are healing without a known cure or a known vaccine. It's because the body knows better than we do about how to heal itself. So the first thing is just try to get away from negativity and get more towards positivity. The second thing I would say is, while you're at home, really try to, focus on what you're eating. I think that that's a big thing people aren't taking a look at right now, is make sure that you're eating correctly. Make sure you're eating whole foods, nutritional foods. Make sure you're supplementing vitamins and minerals, giving your body the resources it needs to build that nice, beautiful house that is you and your health. And really, I think there's one that really not a whole lot of people are talking about right now, which is unfortunate, is I think a lot of people really need to be looking and reading right now. I think a lot of people, that knowledge is very, very prevalent right now. I think that there's a lot of resources available, and people need to realize that everybody is accessible. This is something that, for the first time in our adult lives, probably the first time in the existence of the world, everybody is going through the exact same thing. You know, there's literally only one other phenomenon I can think of where we all experience at the exact same time, and that's the weather. And so truly everyone across the earth and the world is affected by COVID right now. And so everyone's accessible. Everybody's putting their information out there. And so truly, I think the number one thing you could do to better yourself is to do your own research. Don't rely on what other people are saying about health. Don't rely on what other people are saying about statistics. Don't rely on what other people are saying about anything. I think you should just always, in this time you have, do your own research, be comfortable with reading into things, looking at facts, looking at both sides of the coin on everything, and truly coming up with your own educated, logical decision on the decisions you make in regards to your health. In other words, I'm sort of empowering you to make a smart choice relative to your health and well-being that's based on your perception and logical reasoning, not somebody else's. Don't take, Wolf Blitzer's word for it. Don't take, Dr. Fauci's word for it. Don't take President Trump's word for it. Don't take whoever's word for it. Don't take their word for it. What you should do is always look at things and make an airtight logical case for whatever decision you make based on your own inferences and factual evidence. And so truly, I think that, a lot of the stuff most people can have access to, you know what vitamins to take, what minerals to take. A lot of that stuff's free game to be able to look at. What I don't think a lot of people are doing right now with their free time is truly reading into things that are self-improving. Whatever the case may be, whether it's health related, financial related, family related, relationships related, truly just read into things that will, and truly invest in yourself in this times, and really try not to waste as much time as you can. I think that this is a time where it's really easy for people to waste time. It's easy to just sit around and watch Netflix. What's very difficult in this time is to invest that same 4 hours in self-improvement. Right. And so I would just encourage you, if you're watching this, it's a bit of encouragement, is to, look back on this time 2 years from now and say, I really used that time to invest in myself. While others were literally, investing in their own demise, you were investing in the betterment of yourself. And I think you'll look up in 2 years and realize that was time well spent, and it actually may have been a blessing in disguise. You had that time.
I agree. I mean, as insane as it is, I don't think Tiger King is really the thing that's going to save it.
It's funny you bring that up. I haven't seen that. My wife's actually watched it, and so I've caught bits and pieces of it. But yes, I can't agree more. I don't think Tiger King is is going to allow you to grow as as a person and as a human being over the next 2 months, no doubt.
Before we end today, because I know you have another call, to get a little bit more personal. So, what advice would you give yourself if you could talk to yourself 5 years ago? So, I guess for you that would be kind of at the beginning of practice.
Yeah. So myself 5 years ago.
Yeah. What would you tell yourself?
Yeah, that's a good question. That wasn't in the questions you sent me, I don't think.
I think it's very end.
Just kidding. Yeah, just kidding. Yeah, I think I would say, don't worry so much. I think, we enter times sometimes, like even right now, there's never been a moment where I've worried about anything. But I think it's because 5 years ago I worried about everything. And so, when you open a practice, you have to meet overhead, you have to pay bills, you have to take great care of people. There's a lot of different things that's very easy to worry about. And so what I would tell myself is, when things get super busy, learn to slow things down in your head. Learn to think logically, not rationally. Some of the worst decisions that are ever made are in times of chaos when you don't stop and think. And, I would just kind of say, don't worry and let things happen and understand that you've put in the preparation to allow you to get through anything. And that really is just speaks to anybody in any area of life that they're in. It's very easy to, in times like this, go, okay, I just got laid off. I'm super stressed. Life gets super chaotic and busy for a minute. And I truly think it's the successful people that have the ability amongst chaos to slow everything down, think logically, and understand that it's never as bad looking back on something as it was when you were in it. I can think of so many different scenarios and times where, I thought, how am I going to get through this? And you do, and then you look back on it, a year from then, and you're like, why did I stress so hard about that? I mean, it really wasn't that big a deal, and I got through it fairly easily, and I was so worried about it. And so I would say, 5 years ago, that's what I would have said is, just don't worry about anything. Just kind of go with the flow, kind of, take things as they come, roll with the punches, and foul off as many balls as you can because the fastball down the middle is coming. But yeah, I think just don't worry as much. Just sort of slow everything down amongst the chaos, and also be decisive. I think that's another one I would say to myself 5 years ago. It was interesting because I had a point in my career where my first year, I felt like I had to be in my practice all the time. I felt like I have to be in my office all the time. And I remember Dr. Dill specifically telling me, who's my business coach, saying in my second year, he said, don't handcuff yourself to your practice. He's like, you've got to get out and go do things. And so my second year, I decided my second year in practice, I was going to say yes to everything I could say yes to. So I said yes to going to a couple of chiropractic events. When I say a couple, I mean like 6. I said yes to going to the Berkshires. I said yes to going to Mile High. I said yes to going to summer camp. So I was out of my practice more in year 2 by far than I was in year 1. And I looked up and my collections were double what they were in year 2 as they were year 1. And so I was out of my practice more, but made more money. And so I was able to actually kind of see both sides of that. And really, what it really taught me was learning to be very comfortable being uncomfortable. And when I assume a place of comfort, I'm actually uncomfortable. And whenever I feel a little bit uncomfortable, that's where I find comfort. And I think that's truly what year 3, 4, and 5 for me sort of been like, is trying to find, which is why if you live life that way, when things like COVID-19 come, you're sort of comfortable. And I know it can probably seem really backwards to a lot of people, but it's truly something you only understand or experience once you experience it. And, how do I add more onto my schedule to be uncomfortable? How do I add on more new patients that make me uncomfortable? How do I get out of the office more to be uncomfortable? How do I, because truly the comfortable thing to do would be just sit in your office all day, every day and see people. And so there's, for me, no comfort in that anymore. And so that would be another thing I would say is, from 5 years ago, is learn to find ways to make yourself very vulnerable and uncomfortable, because that's where true growth occurs. Getting out of your comfort zone is the only place that growth truly occurs.
Yeah, I completely agree. I sometimes think I'm crazy. I live here in Singapore, of course, and it's around 30 to 33 degrees almost every single day. I exclusively go running between 12 and 3 because that's the time when it's the hottest. If you want to get stronger, you want to do it better, you want to do it fast and be efficient, it's the same thing. You have to challenge yourself as much as you can.
Yeah, I mean, no, that no diamonds were ever created from lack of pressure, and the strongest steel is always formed by the hottest flames. And it's really easy to say that, and a lot of people like cliche terms like that, but truly when you put it into play in your life, I think it's when I surround myself with people who understand, that's when the most growth occurs, I've found.
I think it's very fitting, especially for now, with what a lot of people are going to be going through.
Most definitely.
So thank you, Grant. I just want to thank you again for joining me today. Thank you, everyone who's watching this live or watching again on the replay. If you have any questions, of course, you can always get us in the comments. You can send us a message, or you can always WhatsApp me at 84389550. And of course, I'll make sure that Dr. Grant's office is tagged in this post as well. So if anyone is in Arkansas, they want to go see him, of course, please make sure you reach out to him. I'm sure he'll be happy to help you. Okay, thank you very much for joining me again today.
I appreciate it, and I look forward to being on it soon, and look forward to being in Singapore at some point.
Yeah. See you soon.